No one noticed the man standing beside the black Mercedes except the woman who had once promised to love him forever. "Gage, grab my purse. And try not to look so lost," Brooke Morgan said loud enough for the ballroom entrance to hear. A few executives laughed as the 42-year-old man reached for the designer handbag without a word, his faded silver watch catching the afternoon sun for just a second. They saw a driver. They saw a failure. What none of them realized was that the ink on Gage Kelly's CEO contract had barely dried 2 hours earlier. Then the chairman stepped out of the elevator, froze in place, and walked straight toward the driver. "If you're watching from somewhere in the world, tell me your country and your local time in the comments. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. And if you love slow-burn dramas where the truth wins over appearances, consider subscribing. You won't want to miss tomorrow's story." The first crack in their marriage did not sound like a slammed door. It sounded like quiet. The silence between Gage Kelly and Brooke Morgan settled over their 2-story house in Naperville long before either of them admitted something had broken. Every morning began the same way. Gage woke before sunrise, brewed coffee in an old stainless steel pot he had owned since college, and stepped onto the back porch to watch freight trains cut across the horizon. Their distant horns echoed through the cool Illinois air, while Brooke remained upstairs scrolling through social media studying the lives of executives who vacationed in Aspen and drove imported sports cars. She never understood why her husband enjoyed ordinary things. Gage never tried to explain. He preferred worn leather boots over polished loafers. He drove the same dark blue Ford F-150 for almost 12 years. His favorite steakhouse was a family-owned place west of Aurora, where the waitress knew his name and always brought extra cornbread without asking. Brooke hated going there. She preferred places with valet parking and crystal chandeliers. At first, the differences seemed harmless. Then they became embarrassing. One Friday evening, she invited several co-workers from Kelly Horizon Logistics to dinner downtown. Everyone arrived in luxury SUVs except Gage. His pickup truck rolled into the parking garage with over 200,000 miles on the dashboard. The engine made a noise that sounded like loose metal. Brooke looked away before anyone could see her expression. Inside the restaurant, conversations revolved around investments, private clubs, executive promotions, and million-dollar acquisitions. Someone asked Gage where he worked. He smiled. "I help solve transportation problems." The answer was true. It simply left out almost everything. The table laughed politely. One vice president assumed Gage managed truck routes. Another guessed he supervised warehouse employees. Brooke never corrected them. Instead, she ordered another glass of wine. The narrator could see the tiny movement in Gage's eyes. Not anger, not shame, acceptance. He had learned years ago that people heard only what confirmed their assumptions. When dinner ended, Brooke lingered in the lobby with her co-workers, while Gage waited outside beside the truck. Rain had begun falling over Chicago. The city lights reflected across wet pavement like scattered coins. One of Brooke's colleagues approached her quietly. "You could do better," the woman whispered. Brooke did not answer. She simply looked toward the old pickup parked across the street. Gage stood alone under the awning with his hands inside his jacket pockets. He looked more comfortable than everyone inside the restaurant. Yet, somehow, that calm irritated Brooke even more. Over the next several months, little arguments multiplied. She criticized his clothes, his schedule, his habits, his refusal to chase status. "Why don't you ever try to impress people? Why don't you care what others think? Why don't you want more?" Gage usually answered with another question. More of what? She never liked that answer. Because she did not know. She only knew she wanted to stand beside someone who looked successful. Meanwhile, Gage spent late nights inside a small office above an aging warehouse near O'Hare International Airport. Officially, the space belonged to an independent consulting company. In reality, only 2 attorneys and 1 accountant ever entered the room. Old financial reports covered the desk. Shipping contracts, trust documents, ownership structures. Boxes marked Kelly Family Holdings. Every page connected to responsibilities Brooke never imagined existed. Gage rarely spoke about his father. He never mentioned inheritance. He never discussed board meetings. He never explained why unknown lawyers occasionally called after midnight. He believed privacy protected people. Brooke interpreted privacy as failure. Winter arrived. Snow buried the backyard fence. One evening, Brooke placed an envelope beside Gage's dinner plate. He looked at it for several seconds before opening it. Divorce petition. No dramatic speech followed, no broken dishes, no shouting. The heater hummed softly while snow drifted outside the kitchen window. Brooke folded her arms. "I don't want this life anymore." Gage nodded once. "I know." She almost seemed disappointed that he did not argue. Perhaps she expected tears, perhaps anger. Instead, he quietly finished his coffee before reading every page. There was something unusual buried inside the financial disclosures. Several electronic transfers from their joint household account had moved toward the consulting firms connected to Kelly Horizon vendors. Small amounts, $8,000, $12,000, $15,000, spread across many months. Most people would never notice. Gage noticed everything. He closed the folder without mentioning it. His heartbeat never changed. Outside, a freight train rolled through the darkness. The sound reminded him of something his father used to say. Tracks always lead somewhere. That night, after Brooke went upstairs, Gage opened his laptop. He copied every bank statement, every tax return, every shared investment record, every email receipt. Then he stored duplicates inside an encrypted drive locked in a safe deposit box downtown. He was not preparing for revenge. He was preparing for truth. Long after midnight, his phone vibrated. The sender had no name, only an anonymous email address. Attached was a single PDF, no message, no explanation. Only a list of transportation vendors receiving millions of dollars from Kelly Horizon Logistics. At the bottom appeared one signature, Brooke Morgan. Gage stared at the screen while the house remained completely silent. For the first time since receiving the divorce papers, he wondered whether the end of his marriage was only the beginning of something much larger. Chicago looked different from the 36th floor. From that height, traffic disappeared into thin silver lines, commuter trains crawled through the city like patient insects, and Lake Michigan stretched toward the horizon beneath a gray November sky. Inside Kelly Horizon Logistics headquarters, polished marble reflected ceiling lights that never seemed to dim even after sunset. Thousands of employees believed the building belonged to institutional investors from New York and Boston. Most of them were wrong. The company had been built 48 years earlier by Patrick Kelly, a former truck mechanic who started with 2 delivery trailers and one impossible dream. By the time he died, Kelly Horizon owned distribution centers across 11 states, managed hundreds of transportation contracts, and moved nearly 12% of the Midwest's commercial freight every week. Patrick had trusted only one person to inherit everything, his son, Gage Kelly, but almost nobody inside the company knew that. After Patrick's funeral, ownership disappeared behind family trusts holding corporations and confidential legal structures managed by 3 independent law firms. The board announced that the company would continue operating under private investment management until succession plans were completed. Executives accepted the explanation. Employees never questioned it. Even Brooke Morgan believed it. In her mind, Kelly Horizon had become a corporation without a family, without a face, without an owner, which meant someone ambitious enough could eventually climb all the way to the top. She intended to be that person. Her office overlooked the Chicago River, decorated with expensive artwork and shelves filled with leadership awards. Every morning, assistants arrived before 8 to organize meetings, answer calls, and prepare presentations. Brooke enjoyed watching people wait outside her office. Power, she believed, should be visible. The narrator never entered Brooke's thoughts. Instead, the story stayed with Gage. He knew exactly how she had changed. Years earlier, she celebrated promotions with pizza and cheap wine. Now, she measured success by reserved parking spaces and invitations to executive lounges. Gage rarely visited headquarters. Most employees would not recognize him even if they passed him in the hallway. That anonymity became useful. 3 weeks after signing the divorce papers, another anonymous package arrived at the consulting office near O'Hare Airport. No return address, no fingerprints. Inside sat a thick envelope containing photocopies of procurement invoices. Several transportation vendors billed Kelly Horizon millions of dollars for services that appeared unusually expensive. One invoice listed emergency fleet repairs in Indiana. Another billed consulting fees for facilities that no longer existed. A third referenced trucks that had been retired years before. Someone was stealing from the company. The amounts looked insignificant individually. $30,000, $70,000, $120,000. But together they formed something enormous. Millions. Gage spread every page across the conference table. He studied dates before studying names. His father had taught him that numbers rarely lied. People did. The signatures appeared again and again. Regional managers, procurement officers, finance approvals. Then one name appeared near the bottom of several authorization sheets. Brooke Morgan. Her signature did not necessarily prove wrongdoing. Senior executives signed hundreds of contracts every year. Still, Gage felt something tighten inside him. Not anger, disappointment. He remembered Brooke laughing over backyard barbecues years earlier, saying she wanted to help people build something meaningful. Now, her signature floated across transactions that made no sense. He called Olivia Carter. The attorney arrived carrying 2 coffees and a leather folder. She reviewed the documents without speaking. 20 minutes passed before she finally looked up. "This isn't enough. I know. But it's enough to keep digging." Olivia nodded. If someone is moving money through vendors, they'll leave another trail. Gage stared through the office window toward passing freight trains. They already have. For weeks, they followed paperwork instead of rumors. Invoices became shipping manifests. Shipping manifests became warehouse inspections. Warehouse inspections became tax filings. Every document connected to another. The web grew larger. One name surfaced repeatedly. Daniel Whitmore, Chief Financial Officer, respected by investors, admired by analysts, regular speaker at business conferences. His public reputation was spotless. His private approvals appeared everywhere. Late one evening, Gage visited a distribution center outside Joliet wearing jeans, a gray sweatshirt, and work boots. Nobody recognized him. Forklifts moved between loading docks while diesel engines echoed through the yard. Drivers signed manifests inside a small office where an elderly dispatcher complained about missing maintenance budgets. "The company keeps cutting repairs," the dispatcher muttered. "But headquarters says spending is at record levels." Gage listened quietly. Outside, dozens of trailers waited for inspections that never happened. The paperwork claimed they had already been serviced. Reality disagreed. He took photographs with his phone. Nothing dramatic. Rust, broken lights, damaged tires. Simple evidence. Facts. As midnight approached, he drove back toward Chicago with the heater humming softly inside the truck. Snow flurries drifted across Interstate 55. His father used to drive these same highways delivering machinery through winter storms because customers depended on promises being kept. Patrick Kelly often repeated one sentence during those trips: "Companies don't collapse because of markets. They collapse because honest people stop paying attention." Gage understood those words better than ever. The following Monday, Brooke attended an executive strategy meeting. She confidently presented expansion plans for new logistics contracts across Wisconsin and Iowa. Board members applauded. Daniel Whitmore smiled from across the room. Neither noticed Emma Dawson sitting quietly near the back. The 28-year-old compliance analyst had spent the weekend reviewing archived procurement files. Something bothered her. Several electronic approvals carried identical timestamps despite being signed by different departments hundreds of miles apart. Impossible. She printed copies and placed them inside her desk drawer. She did not yet know whom to trust. That same afternoon, Gage received another anonymous email. This one contained no attachments, only a single sentence. "If you want the truth, stop looking at invoices and start looking at consulting agreements." No signature, no explanation. Seconds later, the message disappeared from the server. Deleted remotely. Gage leaned back in his chair. Someone inside the company was helping him. Someone else knew corruption reached higher than ordinary accounting mistakes. Outside his office window, another freight train crossed the tracks below. The cars disappeared into darkness one after another, carrying thousands of tons of cargo towards destinations nobody could yet see. Gage watched until the final car vanished. Then he picked up his phone. "Olivia," he said quietly. "I think it's time I went back inside the company." On the other end of the line, silence lasted several seconds. Then she answered. "I was wondering how long you'd wait." The decision had finally been made. He would return. Not as the owner's son. Not as the future CEO. And certainly not as Brooke Morgan's ex-husband. He would walk through the front doors as someone nobody would bother noticing. Sometimes the safest place to hide was in plain sight. The divorce hearing lasted just 38 minutes. Outside, the Cook County Courthouse television crews chased politicians and criminal defense attorneys, while ordinary families hurried through security checkpoints carrying folders thicker than their futures. Inside courtroom 312, everything felt strangely quiet. No shouting, no accusations, no dramatic speeches that would later become stories told at holiday dinners. Only signatures. Pens sliding across paper. The dull sound of legal language replacing what had once been love. Gage Kelly sat beside Olivia Carter wearing the same navy suit he had purchased nearly 8 years earlier. The jacket fit perfectly. The cuffs showed faint signs of wear. He looked like a middle-class consultant attending a routine business meeting instead of a man quietly surrendering half of the life he had built. Across the room, Brooke Morgan looked immaculate. Cream-colored designer jacket, gold earrings, perfect posture. She never glanced towards Gage for more than a second. Instead, her attention stayed on her attorney and the property settlement spread across polished oak tables. The judge reviewed the documents one final time. "The parties have reached a mutual agreement." Both attorneys answered yes. The judge nodded. No one asked whether the agreement was fair. Only whether it was voluntary. Olivia leaned slightly toward Gage. "You can still object." He shook his head. "No." She lowered her voice even further. "You're giving away more than the law requires." "I know." "The house." "I know." "The retirement accounts." "I know." "The investment portfolio." "I know." Olivia studied his face. Most clients reached this stage angry. Some cried, some bargained, some collapsed under regret. Gage simply listened. His heartbeat remained steady. The narrator could only see what moved beneath that calm surface, not resentment, fatigue. He looked like a man who had carried something heavy for too long and finally decided to set it down. The judge signed the final order. Just like that, 20 years together became a stack of certified paperwork. Brooke stood first. She gathered expensive folders into a leather handbag and thanked her attorney with a smile that looked almost relieved. As she walked toward the courtroom exit, she paused beside Gage. "You'll be fine." The sentence sounded less like kindness than reassurance to herself. Gage answered softly, "So will you." Then she disappeared into the hallway. Olivia waited until the door closed. "You should have fought harder." "For what?" "For your money." Gage looked toward the empty witness stand. Money isn't difficult to replace. She understood what he meant. His father had left him assets worth hundreds of millions through trusts Brooke had never known existed. The suburban house, the brokerage account, the SUV. Those things meant almost nothing compared with the family company. And Kelly Horizon remained untouched. Not because Gage hid it during the divorce, because legally Brooke had never owned any part of it. Inherited trust assets stayed outside marital distribution under carefully written estate structures. Patrick Kelly had planned decades ahead. Sometimes Gage wondered whether his father had anticipated every possible storm. Outside, the courthouse, snow had begun falling. Tiny flakes drifted between downtown skyscrapers while traffic crawled along LaSalle Street. Gage stood beneath the entrance awning, watching strangers hurry past. He felt strangely lighter. Not happier. Simply lighter. Olivia stepped beside him, holding a folder against the wind. "I've reviewed the financial disclosures again." "So have I." "I found something." Gage looked toward her. She opened the folder and removed several highlighted pages. These transfers. He recognized them immediately. Joint checking account, consulting fees, vendor reimbursements, repeated payments over 18 months, small enough to avoid attention, large enough to matter. Olivia frowned. They all connect to businesses contracting with Kelly Horizon. Gage nodded. "I noticed. You never mentioned it." There wasn't enough evidence. She looked back toward the courthouse. "Do you think Brooke knew?" Gage answered after several seconds. "I don't know." It was the truth. The narrator could see uncertainty hidden beneath his composure. He remembered Brooke laughing over cheap tacos after their first apartment lease. He remembered camping trips beside Wisconsin lakes. He remembered driving all night to visit her mother in the hospital. Those memories refused to match the signatures appearing on questionable financial transfers. Perhaps she had simply approved paperwork without reading it. Perhaps someone else used her authority. Perhaps ambition had carried her somewhere she never intended to go. The possibilities unsettled him more than certainty would have. Later that afternoon, Gage returned to the small consulting office near O'Hare. Boxes filled one wall. Old company records occupied another. The office smelled faintly of paper and coffee. He removed his wedding ring before placing it inside the top drawer of his desk. For several moments, he simply stared at it. The gold band reflected fluorescent light. Nothing else. No dramatic emotion arrived. Only silence. He closed the drawer. Then he opened his laptop. The anonymous email from several days earlier remained saved offline. Attached procurement files, vendor agreements, financial authorizations. He began comparing signatures against divorce disclosures. Hour after hour, numbers filled spreadsheets. Transfer dates, invoice approvals, corporate reimbursements, mileage claims, consulting expenses. Patterns slowly emerged. 3 shell companies repeatedly appeared between Kelly Horizon payments and personal accounts owned by unrelated businesses. One of those businesses occupied a mailbox inside a strip mall outside Rockford. Another listed an abandoned warehouse in Gary, Indiana. The third used a virtual office with no employees. Someone had built an elaborate maze. Gage printed everything. The stack reached nearly 4 inches high. Evening settled over the city. Freight aircraft descended toward O'Hare every few minutes, their lights crossing the office windows like slow-moving stars. His phone rang. Harold Bennett, chairman of Kelly Horizon. The older man's voice sounded tired. "I heard about the divorce. It happens. I'm sorry. So am I." A pause followed. Then Harold spoke again. "The board wants to finalize succession." Gage remained silent. "The timing isn't ideal." "There may never be an ideal time," Harold continued. "The company needs someone who understands what your father built." Gage walked toward the window overlooking the rail yard. Steel tracks stretched endlessly beneath orange streetlights. "I can't lead while corruption remains inside." "You think it's that serious?" "I know it is." Another silence. Finally, Harold sighed. "What do you need?" "Time." "You'll have it." The call ended. Gage stood alone for several minutes. The office clock ticked softly. Somewhere below, a locomotive horn echoed through the cold night. He remembered being 14 years old riding beside his father in an old delivery truck. Patrick Kelly had pointed toward endless railroad tracks disappearing into darkness. Every shipment leaves a trail. So does every lie. At the time, Gage thought the lesson was about freight. Now he understood it was about people. He gathered every copied document into identical gray binders. Each received handwritten labels. Vendors, approvals, transfers, executive signatures. The final binder remained empty. Its cover simply read "Evidence." He placed it inside the office safe and locked the heavy steel door. As he reached for the light switch, his computer chimed. A new anonymous email had arrived. No greeting, no sender. Only one scanned photograph. The image showed Brooke standing beside Daniel Whitmore outside a private airport terminal 6 months earlier. Between them stood two men Gage did not recognize. Behind them waited a charter jet registered to one of the shell companies he had spent all afternoon investigating. Beneath the picture appeared a single sentence. "You're still looking too low." The screen went dark. Gage stared at his own reflection in the monitor. For the first time since signing the divorce papers, he realized the conspiracy inside Kelly Horizon might reach far above procurement offices and accounting departments, and whoever was sending the messages expected him to keep climbing. The first employee to greet Gage Kelly did not ask for his name. She asked if he needed a visitor badge. The security desk inside Kelly Horizon Logistics occupied the center of a vast marble lobby where polished floors reflected the morning light pouring through 40-foot windows. Executives hurried toward elevators carrying leather briefcases while receptionists answered phones with rehearsed smiles. No one paid attention to the quiet man wearing gray work pants, a navy jacket, and carrying a small black backpack. He looked like another contractor. The security officer slid a clipboard across the counter. Transportation Department. Gage looked at the temporary identification card already waiting for him. Consulting Services, Operations Review, Authorized Access. He nodded once. "That's right." The officer handed over the badge without another question. Within seconds, Gage disappeared into the crowd. Invisible. Exactly as he intended. The narrator followed only his thoughts. He had spent months studying spreadsheets and invoices. Today, he wanted to study people. The first stop was the dispatch center on the building's lower level. Large digital screens tracked hundreds of freight movements across the Midwest. Drivers called in from Wisconsin, Indiana, Missouri, and Iowa, while dispatch coordinators adjusted schedules with practiced efficiency. The room buzzed with constant motion. No executive ever visited this floor. Gage walked slowly between workstations. He asked simple questions. How long have you worked here? How often are trucks delayed? Do repair requests get approved quickly? The employees answered honestly because they assumed he had no authority. One dispatcher laughed bitterly. We've been waiting 6 months for replacement trailers. Another shook his head. Corporate says budgets are frozen. A mechanic cleaning grease from his hands looked toward the ceiling. Funny thing is, accounting reports record millions in maintenance spending. The men exchanged tired smiles. Nobody believed those numbers anymore. Gage listened without interrupting. His father had once told him that executives who never visited loading docks eventually stopped understanding their own companies. He refused to become one of them. Late that morning, he crossed into Warehouse 4. Forklifts moved pallets between shipping lanes while radios crackled overhead. The smell of diesel fuel mixed with fresh lumber and machine oil. A young employee accidentally dropped a shipment of plastic containers near receiving Bay B boxes scattered across the concrete floor. The worker froze. His face turned pale. Across the room, a supervisor stormed toward him. "What are you doing?" "I'm sorry." "Do you know what those cost?" The supervisor continued yelling while dozens of workers looked away. Gage quietly knelt beside the employee and began picking up the containers. The young man looked surprised. "You don't have to help. They'll still need to be picked up." Within minutes, several other workers joined them. The entire aisle cleared in silence. The supervisor muttered something under his breath before walking away. Nobody thanked Gage. They simply returned to work. He preferred it that way. Respect did not require applause. Near noon, he entered the employee cafeteria. Executives rarely ate there. Most ordered catered lunches upstairs. Warehouse staff, maintenance crews, janitors, drivers, and clerks filled the tables instead. Gage carried a tray holding soup and grilled cheese before sitting alone near a window. Across from him sat an older janitor named Luis Ramirez. The man smiled politely. "First week, something like that." Luis chuckled. "You'll get used to this place. You like working here?" The older man considered the question. "I like the people." "And the company." Luis stirred his coffee. "The company forgot the people." The sentence lingered longer than either expected. Before Gage could answer, a woman approached, carrying several folders against her chest. She looked no older than 30. Brown hair tied neatly behind her head. Simple blue blouse, no expensive jewelry. Her employee badge read Emma Dawson, Compliance Analyst. She searched for an empty chair before noticing Gage. "Mind if I sit?" He nodded. The three ate quietly for several minutes. Emma finally broke the silence. "I haven't seen you before." "I'm reviewing transportation operations." "Oh." She seemed slightly disappointed. Most consultants spoke endlessly about efficiency metrics and corporate strategy. Gage instead asked Luis whether his grandson still played baseball. The old man smiled widely. Emma noticed. Few executives even knew the janitor's name. She watched Gage more carefully after that. The afternoon brought another opportunity. A supply elevator malfunctioned near the shipping docks, delaying dozens of outbound deliveries. Managers argued over responsibility while workers waited. Gage removed his jacket, climbed beside the maintenance crew, and spent 40 minutes helping move heavy pallets by hand. Sweat soaked through his shirt. His hands became dusty. No cameras recorded the effort. No executives noticed. Except one. Brooke Morgan stepped onto the loading floor unexpectedly with 2 regional directors. She wore a tailored ivory suit and heels unsuited for warehouse concrete. Her perfume arrived before her voice. She frowned immediately. "Why is this area behind schedule?" Supervisors rushed toward her. Excuses filled the air. Mechanical failure, delayed repair approvals, vendor issues, budget limitations. Brooke listened impatiently before spotting Gage carrying another pallet with warehouse employees. For one brief second, she looked directly at him. Then she looked away. There was no recognition, only indifference. To Brooke, the man lifting freight looked exactly where he belonged, among laborers, invisible. She turned toward the operations manager. "I expect this fixed before tomorrow." Then she walked away without another glance. Gage watched her disappear behind glass doors. His expression never changed. The narrator could see the memory hidden beneath his calm. Years earlier, Brooke would have joined the workers herself. She would have laughed while carrying boxes. She would have bought everyone coffee afterward. Somewhere along the climb toward executive offices, that version of her had disappeared. Late in the afternoon, Emma appeared outside the temporary consulting office assigned to Gage. She knocked softly. "I thought you might need these." She handed him several printed compliance reports. Vendor payment summaries. "I wasn't supposed to notice them, but I did." Gage flipped through the pages. Several transactions matched shell companies already under investigation. One approval signature belonged to Daniel Whitmore. Another belonged to Brooke Morgan. Emma lowered her voice. "I think somebody has been deleting internal audit requests." "Why tell me?" She hesitated. "Because you actually listen to warehouse workers." The answer surprised even her. She quickly excused herself and disappeared down the hallway. Gage remained standing in silence. Trust inside large corporations rarely began with executive meetings. Sometimes it began over cafeteria soup. Sometimes by helping someone pick up dropped boxes. As evening approached, he organized Emma's documents beside the growing stack already stored inside his office cabinet. Each page strengthened the same conclusion. Money was moving through the company in ways nobody wanted examined. His phone vibrated. A text from Olivia Carter. Board succession meeting moved forward. "Harold wants to see you next week. Keep your cover intact." Gage slipped the phone back into his pocket. Outside his office window, the last employees crossed the parking lot beneath orange streetlights. Most believed they worked for anonymous investors. Most believed power occupied the top floor. None suspected the quiet consultant leaving through the employee exit held controlling ownership over everything surrounding them. As he reached the parking garage, a black luxury SUV rolled past. Inside sat Brooke Morgan. She never looked toward him. She was already checking tomorrow's executive schedule on her tablet. The SUV disappeared into downtown traffic. Gage climbed into his old pickup truck instead. The engine started on the second attempt. He smiled faintly. Appearances, he reminded himself, remained the easiest disguise in America. And tomorrow, he intended to disappear even deeper inside his own company. The peninsula of Chicago stood beneath a clear autumn sky like a polished monument to money. Luxury sedans lined the entrance. Valets hurried between vehicles. Camera flashes bounced across marble columns, while reporters waited behind velvet barriers, hoping to capture another smiling executive shaking another generous donor's hand. Tonight's annual Kelly Horizon Foundation Gala was supposed to celebrate growth. Instead, it would quietly reveal character. Gage Kelly arrived 25 minutes before the first speech. Not in a limousine, not in a chauffeured Escalade. He drove himself. The same dark blue pickup truck rolled into the underground employee parking garage before disappearing beneath the hotel. Few people noticed. Even fewer cared. He parked beside maintenance vehicles and walked through the service entrance carrying only a black garment bag and a small leather portfolio. His temporary consultant badge remained clipped to his jacket. He preferred it there. The disguise still worked. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers illuminated hundreds of round tables dressed in white linen. Soft jazz drifted through hidden speakers. Waiters carried silver trays filled with champagne, while photographers searched constantly for recognizable faces. The event planner rushed across the lobby giving instructions into a headset. Governor's office arrives at 7. Media wall opens in 5 minutes. Board members on the east staircase. Everything moved with rehearsed precision. Gage stayed invisible. He walked slowly through service corridors that connected the ballroom with loading docks below. Employees nodded politely. Some assumed he worked transportation. Others believed he belonged to hotel logistics. Nobody questioned him. On the second floor, Emma Dawson stood near a registration table reviewing seating assignments. Stacks of donor cards covered the desk. She looked exhausted. When she noticed Gage, she smiled. "I didn't know consultants worked charity events." "They asked for extra hands." Emma laughed softly. "They ask too much from everyone." She handed him several misplaced guest envelopes. "Can you leave these at table 12? Gage accepted them without hesitation. As he crossed the ballroom, he watched executives greeting donors with practiced enthusiasm. Some conversations sounded genuine. Most sounded expensive. Near the center stage stood Daniel Whitmore. The chief financial officer wore a tuxedo tailored so perfectly that it looked painted onto him. His laugh carried across the room. Every important investor seemed eager to shake his hand. Twice, Gage observed Daniel whispering privately with vendors whose names appeared repeatedly inside suspicious accounting files. One of them was Victor Sloan. Officially, Victor owned a transportation consulting company. Unofficially, his business address matched an empty office suite in Rockford. Daniel slipped him a folded envelope. The exchange lasted only seconds. Nobody else appeared to notice. Gage noticed everything. He continued walking. The narrator stayed close to his quiet thoughts. Evidence rarely arrived dramatically. It hid inside ordinary moments. A handshake, a smile, an envelope changing hands. Across the ballroom, Brooke Morgan finally appeared. Conversations stopped almost instinctively. She descended the grand staircase wearing a midnight blue evening gown that shimmered beneath crystal lights. Diamond earrings reflected flashes from waiting photographers. She moved confidently through the crowd greeting investors and board members by name. Years of executive success had taught her exactly how to enter a room. Several junior employees whispered admiration. One donor described her as the future face of Kelly Horizon. Brooke accepted every compliment naturally. She believed she had earned them. Gage watched from across the ballroom while adjusting centerpieces on a nearby table. She passed within 20 feet of him without recognizing his face. Not once. Not even for a second. Time had changed both of them. Or perhaps pride had changed only one. Harold Bennett arrived shortly afterward. The 70-year-old chairman entered quietly through a private elevator surrounded by 2 assistants. Unlike everyone else, Harold scanned the room instead of greeting cameras. His eyes eventually found Gage. For the briefest moment they met. Neither smiled. Neither waved. Harold simply gave an almost invisible nod before continuing toward the donor reception. The signal lasted less than 1 second. It meant only one thing. Everything remained on schedule. By 7:30, nearly 400 guests filled the ballroom. Auction items lined the west wall. Military veterans, business leaders, city officials, and nonprofit organizations mingled beneath enormous floral displays. A jazz quartet played softly near the stage. Waiters circulated endlessly. Emma hurried between registration desks carrying updated seating charts. One of the volunteers accidentally dropped several gift bags near the entrance. Without hesitation, Gage bent down to help collect them. Another volunteer joined. Then another. Within moments, everything had been restored. The young volunteer thanked him. You work transportation. I help where needed. She smiled. We need more people like you. The words lingered unexpectedly. Across the room, Brooke noticed the small gathering. She walked toward them accompanied by Daniel Whitmore and two senior vice presidents. The conversation around them gradually quieted. Brooke stopped directly in front of Gage. For one long second, she stared. Recognition almost surfaced. Almost. Then disappeared beneath assumption. She looked at the volunteer beside him. Is this the new driver? The young woman looked confused. I think he's with operations. Brooke laughed lightly. Same difference. Several executives nearby chuckled. Daniel looked briefly towards Gage before losing interest. Brooke removed her designer handbag and extended it toward him without another thought. Hold this while I greet the donors. The ballroom fell strangely still. A nearby photographer instinctively raised his camera. Emma Dawson froze beside the registration desk. She looked from Brooke to Gage with visible discomfort. The narrator could feel only Gage's quiet heartbeat. Slow, steady. Not because humiliation did not hurt, because he had learned long ago that wounded pride often destroyed careful plans. He accepted the handbag. No argument, no explanation, no anger, just a simple nod. Brooke turned away immediately. Her attention returned to cameras and applause. The crowd resumed talking. Music continued. Only Emma remained standing where she was. Her eyes followed Gage as he carefully placed the expensive handbag on a nearby chair before returning to help hotel staff carry auction materials toward the stage. She walked over quietly. You didn't have to do that. Gage adjusted another box onto a cart. I know. Then why? He looked toward the ballroom entrance where donors continued arriving beneath bright lights. Because tonight isn't about me. Emma wanted to ask another question. Instead, she remained silent. Something about the answer unsettled her. High above them, hidden security cameras continued recording every hallway, every entrance, every ballroom table, every interaction, including one elegant executive publicly mistaking the future CEO of Kelly Horizon Logistics for hired transportation staff. And somewhere inside the hotel, an unknown man wearing a black suit quietly downloaded every minute of footage onto an encrypted drive. The gala had only just begun. But the first piece of evidence was already safely preserved. The music never stopped. Champagne glasses continued clinking beneath crystal chandeliers, while a string quartet played softly near the ballroom stage. Waiters moved through the crowd carrying silver trays, and photographers chased smiles that looked more rehearsed than sincere. No one seemed to notice the moment Brooke Morgan had handed her handbag to the quiet man she believed worked transportation. No one except Gage and Emma Dawson. Emma remained beside the registration desk longer than necessary. Her eyes followed Gage as he calmly returned to arranging auction displays instead of defending himself. She could not understand it. Most people would have protested. Some would have walked away. Others would have created a public scene. Gage did none of those things. He simply continued working. The narrator could see only his thoughts. Humiliation faded. Information remained. Every laugh, every expression, every careless sentence, those things could never be erased. He slowly crossed the ballroom, carrying a stack of donation catalogs toward the silent auction tables. Guests stepped aside without looking at him. To them, he blended into the background with hotel staff and catering employees. That anonymity became his greatest advantage. Near the center of the ballroom, Daniel Whitmore stood beside Victor Sloan and another contractor Gage recognized from the anonymous documents. Their conversation appeared casual. Golf, travel, business forecasts. Yet every few minutes one of them glanced toward the private executive lounge overlooking the ballroom. Something important would happen there. Gage pretended to straighten flower arrangements while quietly observing. Victor slipped a folded note into Daniel's jacket pocket. The exchange lasted less than 2 seconds. No handshake, no hesitation. Years of practice had made them comfortable. Unfortunately for them, comfort often created mistakes. Across the room, Emma noticed the exchange as well. She reached into her purse and quietly typed something into her phone. Seconds later, the screen locked again. She said nothing. Meanwhile, Brooke entertained donors near the stage. Her laughter echoed confidently across the ballroom. Several board members complimented her recent expansion proposals. A television reporter requested a brief interview. Brooke accepted immediately. Standing beneath bright studio lights, she spoke about leadership transparency and ethical growth. The irony remained invisible to everyone listening, except Gage. He remembered another version of Brooke, a young woman sitting beside him in a cheap diner years earlier, excited because they finally had enough savings to buy second-hand furniture for their apartment. She had once believed success meant building something together. Now, success seemed measured by applause. The interview ended. More cameras surrounded her. Gage quietly pushed another cart towards storage. As he passed behind the ballroom stage, he discovered a narrow hallway leading toward the private meeting suites reserved for executives. Security guards stood nearby. No unauthorized personnel allowed. He turned away immediately. The hallway itself mattered less than who entered it. Within 20 minutes, Daniel disappeared through those doors. Victor followed 3 minutes later, then another procurement executive. The pattern repeated itself, always individually, never together. Harold Bennett entered last. The chairman looked uncomfortable. Unlike the others, he did not remain long. He emerged less than 10 minutes later with a serious expression before returning downstairs. Their behavior confirmed what Gage already suspected. The real conversations never happened in public. Back inside the ballroom, Emma approached quietly carrying a clipboard. "I saw what happened." Gage looked toward her. "What part?" "Your ex-wife." He said nothing. Emma lowered her voice. "Why didn't you tell her who you are?" Gage adjusted another table centerpiece before answering. "Would it have changed anything?" She considered the question. Probably not. Brooke had already decided who deserved respect. Titles only came afterward. Emma looked toward the executive lounge. "I think something strange is happening upstairs." "So do I." She hesitated before pulling a folded paper from beneath the clipboard. "I found this in accounting archives." The paper contained 3 vendor payment schedules, all approved within 6 minutes. 3 different departments, 3 different states. Impossible. Electronic timestamps matched exactly. Someone had manipulated internal approvals. Gage folded the page carefully. "Keep this private," Emma nodded. "I haven't told anyone." "Good." Their conversation ended as several guests approached, asking where additional auction forms could be found. Gage stepped away immediately. Invisible once more. Hours passed. Charity speeches filled the ballroom. Executives toasted future expansion. Scholarship recipients thanked generous donors. Millions of dollars were pledged before dessert arrived. On the surface, the evening looked flawless. Beneath the surface, tiny fractures widened quietly. Near 9 o'clock, the Master of Ceremonies invited Harold Bennett onto the stage. The elderly chairman thanked volunteers and sponsors before announcing record charitable contributions. Applause filled the room. Harold's eyes briefly scanned the audience. They stopped on Gage, only for a heartbeat, then moved away again. Nobody else noticed. The signal meant only one thing. Wait, not yet. Gage understood. He remained exactly where he was, near the ballroom entrance, holding a clipboard, appearing no more important than hotel staff. That was when Brooke approached again. She carried another designer shopping bag, this time speaking over her shoulder to another executive while walking directly toward him. Without slowing down, she handed him the bag. "Put this in my car." Her voice remained confident. "I'll leave after the auction." She never looked directly at his face, never realized whose hands accepted the expensive leather handles. Nearby executives smiled politely. One whispered, "Poor guy." Another laughed quietly. Emma watched from across the room, visibly uncomfortable. Gage simply nodded once. "No problem." He carried the bag toward the service corridor. Inside the hallway, he stopped briefly beneath a security camera. The red recording light blinked steadily overhead. Everything had been captured. Every instruction, every expression, every laugh. He continued toward the parking level where hotel attendants organized valet tickets. A young valet reached for the bag. "I'll take that." Gage shook his head. "I've got it." He carefully placed the bag inside Brooke's black Range Rover before closing the door. Then he stood alone inside the underground garage, listening to distant music echo through concrete walls. The silence felt strangely peaceful. His phone vibrated. A message from Olivia Carter. "Board confirmation finalized. Effective tomorrow morning, the CEO appointment becomes official." Gage read the message twice, then locked the screen. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, patience remained more valuable than power. He returned upstairs, carrying an empty garment hanger as though he had completed another ordinary task. Guests continued laughing. Wine continued flowing. Brooke remained surrounded by admirers. No one realized the quiet man they had mistaken for hired transportation would soon control every office, every contract, and every executive title inside Kelly Horizon Logistics. The gala still had an hour remaining, and somewhere above the ballroom inside a private executive suite, a locked briefcase containing confidential vendor contracts had just been left completely unattended. Gage noticed it the moment the door failed to close. So did Emma Dawson. Neither of them spoke, but both understood that the longest night of the investigation had only just begun. The executive lounge overlooked the ballroom through a wall of smoked glass. From inside, the guests below looked small, like pieces moving across a polished chessboard. The room itself was quiet. Dark walnut furniture lined the walls. A private bar occupied one corner untouched except for two crystal glasses that still held melting ice. Soft yellow lamps replaced the bright lighting downstairs, giving everything the appearance of a private library instead of a corporate meeting room. When the last executive stepped out, the heavy door remained slightly open. No one noticed. Everyone downstairs remained focused on speeches and applause. Emma Dawson stood in the hallway pretending to organize event folders. Her heartbeat quickened. She looked toward Gage. He understood immediately. Neither spoke, neither needed to. Emma quietly walked towards the stairwell and remained there, casually blocking the hallway from unexpected visitors. Gage slipped inside. The room smelled faintly of expensive whiskey and cedar wood. Nothing appeared unusual at first glance. Leather chairs, presentation folders, company brochures, donation schedules. Yet experience had taught him that the most important evidence rarely sat in plain sight. He slowly crossed toward the conference table. An expensive black leather briefcase rested beside one chair. Unlocked. Someone had left in a hurry. Gage did not touch it immediately. Instead, he examined the room. 2 ceiling cameras. 1 emergency exit. No motion sensors. No alarms. The ballroom orchestra below began another song, muffling every sound above. He finally opened the case. Inside rested 3 thick folders. The first contained sponsorship agreements, nothing unusual. The second held executive travel itineraries. Again, nothing alarming. The third folder carried no label, only a blue sticker. Inside waited dozens of consulting contracts. The names appeared instantly familiar. Victor Sloan Consulting, Northridge Infrastructure, Midwest Fleet Advisors. 3 shell companies already connected to suspicious transfers. Gage turned each page slowly. Amounts exceeded previous estimates. One contract authorized emergency consulting services totaling $6 million. Another approved fleet modernization studies worth $4.8 million. The signatures looked legitimate. Daniel Whitmore, Brooke Morgan, regional procurement officers, legal review. Everything appeared properly documented. Everything also looked impossible. No actual consulting work had ever been performed. The contracts existed only on paper. His pulse remained steady. The narrator could see only quiet concentration. Not outrage, not satisfaction. Only certainty growing heavier with every page. Someone had transformed Kelly Horizon into a machine that quietly transferred millions through invisible channels. His phone vibrated once. Emma, one short message, 2 minutes. He photographed every page using an encrypted application that automatically stored copies on a secure cloud server controlled by Olivia Carter's law firm. No flash, no sound, no trace. Then he returned every document exactly as he found it. The briefcase closed softly. Nothing appeared disturbed. As he reached the door, another sound stopped him. Footsteps. Several voices approached from the hallway. Gage moved instantly behind a decorative partition beside the fireplace. The door opened. Daniel Whitmore entered first. Victor Sloan followed. Behind them came another executive Gage recognized from accounting reports. Richard Lawson, Director of Procurement. The men assumed they were alone. Daniel loosened his bow tie. Everything signed. Victor nodded. The final wire goes Monday. Richard looked uneasy. What about the audit requests? Daniel laughed quietly. Compliance never gets that far. What about Emma Dawson? She's harmless. The narrator followed only Gage's thoughts. He memorized every sentence, every face, every pause. Victor poured himself another drink. The new CEO appointment still happening? Daniel shrugged. Whoever inherits this company won't understand logistics. He smiled confidently. They never do. Richard chuckled. Anonymous investors make life easy. Daniel lifted his glass. 2 invisible owners. 3 glasses touched. The sound echoed softly through the lounge. Hidden behind the partition, the true owner listened without moving. His expression never changed. Several more minutes passed. Discussion shifted toward golf tournaments and investment funds. Eventually, Victor checked his watch. We should get downstairs. The men collected the briefcase. Daniel locked it this time. Then they disappeared into the hallway. Silence returned. Gage waited another full minute before stepping outside. Emma remained exactly where he had left her. She looked relieved. Did you find anything? He answered quietly. Enough. Her eyes widened. Worse than we thought. He nodded once. Much worse. They returned separately to the ballroom. No one noticed. Auction bidding had reached its highest point. Guests applauded another donation announcement. Brooke stood near the stage laughing beside city officials while photographers captured every smile. She looked completely at ease. She had no idea that only minutes earlier the foundation beneath her career had begun collapsing. Harold Bennett stood near the rear entrance watching the crowd. His eyes briefly met Gage's. This time the chairman approached. The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. You've seen it? Yes. Harold exhaled slowly. I was afraid of that. We need the original server records. They're archived. Can they disappear? They already tried once. Harold handed Gage a folded business card. On the back, someone had handwritten one address: Kelly Horizon Data Archive Center, Elk Grove Village. Open 24 hours. Harold spoke one final sentence: "Go tomorrow morning before anyone else does." Then he walked away to greet another donor as though nothing unusual had happened. The gala entered its final hour. Champagne bottles emptied. Musicians packed instruments. Guests slowly collected coats from attendants. Brooke remained surrounded by executives discussing future promotions. Several congratulated her in advance. Rumors had spread that she would soon become Chief Growth Officer. She accepted every compliment gracefully. Across the ballroom, Gage helped hotel employees remove floral arrangements from empty tables. One waiter thanked him. Another offered leftover coffee. He accepted the paper cup with a smile. The ordinary gesture felt strangely comforting after everything he had just discovered. Near midnight, the ballroom finally emptied. Maintenance crews rolled carts across marble floors, while cleaning staff gathered discarded programs and napkins. Emma found Gage near the service elevator. She handed him a small flash drive. "I copied deleted audit requests from our backup system." He looked surprised. "When?" "Last week. You trusted me." She smiled faintly. "I trusted how you treated people. No title, no position, no salary. Simple kindness had earned more loyalty than authority ever could." Gage slipped the drive into his jacket. Outside, cold Chicago air swept across Michigan Avenue. Traffic had nearly disappeared. The city lights reflected against damp pavement, while the hotel behind him slowly went dark. He climbed into his old pickup truck and started the engine. Before shifting into drive, he opened Olivia Carter's latest message. Emergency board meeting scheduled for Thursday morning. Attendance mandatory. CEO announcement included. He stared at the screen for several seconds. Thursday. Only 3 days remained. 3 days before every secret inside Kelly Horizon would face daylight. He looked once more toward the hotel entrance where Brooke emerged laughing beside Daniel Whitmore, completely unaware of the storm approaching. Then Gage drove into the sleeping city. Inside his jacket rested photographs, contracts, audit files, and a flash drive that could destroy careers worth millions. But one piece of evidence was still missing: the original server logs. And someone inside the company already knew he was getting close. By Tuesday morning, the gala had already become yesterday's news. Business magazines published photographs of smiling donors. Local newspapers praised Kelly Horizon Logistics for raising nearly $12 million for transportation scholarships and community programs. Television stations replayed interviews celebrating ethical leadership and corporate responsibility. No one knew that less than 24 hours earlier, the company's future CEO had been mistaken for hired transportation staff while carrying his former wife's handbag through the ballroom. The photographs existed, but they remained buried inside hotel security archives. For now. Downtown Chicago awakened beneath low-gray clouds as employees streamed into Kelly Horizon headquarters, carrying coffee cups and laptops. Inside the executive floor, preparations had already begun for another announcement. Rumors traveled faster than elevators. Everyone expected Brooke Morgan to receive another promotion. Some believed she would become executive vice president. Others whispered that the board planned to create an entirely new position for her: Chief Growth Officer. Brooke never confirmed the rumors. She never denied them either. She simply smiled. Confidence often answered questions better than words. The narrator remained beside Gage. He stood inside the archive facility in Elk Grove Village, while a technician unlocked rows of secure storage servers that contained decades of company records. The building looked ordinary from outside. Concrete walls, no windows, minimal signage. Inside, thousands of blinking lights illuminated endless racks of digital storage systems. Every invoice, every payroll file, every email, every approval, nothing truly disappeared. The technician adjusted his glasses. Chairman Bennett authorized your access. Gage handed over identification. The man compared signatures before opening another security door. You've got 2 hours. I'll only need 1. The archive room felt colder than the rest of the building. Air conditioning protected aging equipment 24 hours a day. Gage inserted Emma's flash drive into a secure workstation. Instantly, dozens of deleted audit requests appeared. Most had been erased before reaching executive review. Someone inside accounting had systematically prevented investigations from moving forward. He compared timestamps. The pattern emerged immediately. Every deleted audit request involved the same group of consulting vendors: Victor Sloan, Northridge Infrastructure, Midwest Fleet Advisors. Each investigation disappeared within minutes after Daniel Whitmore's office accessed the files. Another coincidence appeared. Several approvals carried Brooke Morgan's executive authorization. Again, Gage leaned back quietly. His expression remained unchanged. The narrator could only observe disappointment growing heavier inside him. He wanted explanations, not excuses. The technician returned, carrying coffee. You finding what you're looking for? Gage answered honestly. I'm finding more than I hoped. The technician laughed without understanding. Meanwhile, 30 miles away, Brooke entered Executive Conference Room A. Daniel Whitmore waited beside the windows overlooking the river. Several presentation boards leaned against the walls displaying projected expansion numbers. Daniel closed the door. Thursday is important, Brooke nodded. I know. The board wants confidence. They'll have it, Daniel smiled. They already see you as the future. He slid a presentation folder across the table. Inside rested prepared remarks celebrating innovation partnerships and long-term growth. Brooke skimmed the pages. Everything looked polished, professional, optimistic. No mention appeared of consulting contracts. No mention of procurement audits. No mention of shell companies. Exactly as Daniel intended. Back at the Archive Center, another discovery appeared: server restoration logs. Someone had remotely deleted accounting correspondence 18 months earlier. The deletion originated from an executive administrator account. Gage restored the files. Thousands of emails flooded onto the screen. Most contained ordinary scheduling conversations. Then one subject line caught his attention: emergency vendor authorization. He opened it. Attached invoices matched shell companies already under investigation. Below the attachments sat digital approvals: Daniel Whitmore, Richard Lawson, Brooke Morgan, Legal Department. Everything appeared complete, until Gage examined metadata hidden beneath the document. The signatures had not been applied separately. They had been inserted simultaneously using administrator credentials after midnight. Someone had forged executive approval chains. His breathing slowed. The implications expanded instantly. Either Brooke knowingly participated, or someone had used her authority without permission. He could not yet know which explanation was true, but for the first time, uncertainty returned. His phone vibrated. Olivia Carter. Tell me you found something. I found server metadata. Enough to start asking different questions. Olivia remained silent. Finally, she spoke softly. The board meeting moved again. When? Tomorrow morning. Gage looked toward the blinking servers. 1 day earlier. Someone wanted decisions made before additional evidence surfaced. Who changed it? We don't know. The line disconnected. Outside rain began falling over suburban Chicago. Tiny drops struck the archive building's roof with steady rhythm. Inside, Gage copied every recovered email onto encrypted storage before logging each file with timestamps and digital verification certificates. If challenged later, authenticity could be proven beyond doubt. Evidence mattered. Emotion did not. Across the city, Emma Dawson sat alone inside Compliance Office 7B. She reviewed archived procurement calendars while eating lunch at her desk. One meeting request seemed unusual. Canceled, deleted, restored automatically through backup synchronization. Location Executive Lounge. The Peninsula, Chicago. Date the same evening as the charity gala. Attendees Daniel Whitmore, Victor Sloan, Richard Lawson, Brooke Morgan, Harold Bennett. The final name surprised her. Chairman Bennett had left after only minutes. Why, she searched deeper. Another attachment appeared. Security access logs. The executive lounge door opened 4 times, then 5. Then one additional access occurred 11 minutes later. No employee identification attached. Only temporary event credentials. Emma stared at the screen. Her pulse quickened. Someone else had entered after everyone left. Someone using temporary authorization. She smiled faintly. She already knew who. Late that afternoon, Gage returned to headquarters carrying only one slim black folder. Nothing about his appearance attracted attention. Employees hurried past, discussing quarterly earnings and upcoming promotions. The elevators climbed endlessly between polished floors. He stepped quietly into the employee cafeteria. Luis Ramirez waved from the corner table. "So, consultant fixing everything yet?" Gage smiled. "Still working on it." Luis laughed. "Take your time. Buildings stay standing longer when the foundation gets repaired first." The old janitor nodded approvingly. Simple wisdom often sounded obvious only after someone said it aloud. Emma entered moments later carrying another stack of documents. She sat beside Gage. Without looking directly at him, she slid a folded note beneath his tray. No one nearby noticed. After finishing lunch, Gage unfolded the paper. 3 words. Check security archives, nothing more. He looked across the cafeteria. Emma had already left. Outside the large windows, evening sunlight finally broke through the clouds reflecting across downtown skyscrapers. For the first time since beginning the investigation, every separate thread appeared connected. Vendor fraud, forged approvals, deleted audits, private meetings, anonymous emails, the charity gala. Everything pointed toward one final confrontation. Tomorrow morning, inside the boardroom, where promotions would be expected, where reputations would collapse, where evidence would finally speak louder than titles. As Gage stood to leave, his phone vibrated once more. A new anonymous message appeared. No sender, no greeting, only one sentence. "Someone inside the board already knows who you are." He stared at the screen until it disappeared automatically 10 seconds later. Then he slipped the phone into his pocket and walked toward the elevator. Tomorrow would not simply decide the company's future. It would reveal who had been playing both sides all along. The boardroom occupied the entire top floor of Kelly Horizon Logistics. Floor-to-ceiling glass overlooked the Chicago skyline, where early morning sunlight reflected off steel towers and the slow-moving waters of the Chicago River. Inside, everything appeared perfectly arranged. Fresh coffee, leather chairs, crystal water glasses, bound presentation packets. The room smelled faintly of cedar and polished wood. It looked prepared for celebration. Most people expected promotion. Very few expected judgment. At 8:45, board members began arriving. Some had flown overnight from Dallas and Minneapolis. Others came from nearby offices downtown. Conversations remained casual. quarterly earnings, transportation markets, federal infrastructure spending. No one mentioned investigations. No one mentioned fraud. The silence itself felt suspicious. The narrator remained beside Gage Kelly. He arrived through the private executive elevator wearing a dark charcoal suit that fit him better than anything he had worn in years. No temporary consultant badge, no warehouse jacket, no clipboard, only quiet confidence. Still, he entered alone. Harold Bennett greeted him near the hallway. The chairman's face revealed little emotion. "Everything ready?" Gage nodded. "The evidence is." Harold placed one hand briefly on his shoulder. "So was your father." Neither man smiled. Neither needed to. At the opposite end of the corridor, Brooke Morgan stepped from another elevator accompanied by Daniel Whitmore. She wore an elegant white business suit with silver buttons and carried a leather presentation portfolio embossed with the Kelly Horizon logo. Several directors congratulated her before the meeting even began. Someone joked that they should already begin printing new business cards. Brooke laughed politely. Daniel looked pleased. The future appeared secure until they noticed someone sitting quietly near the end of the conference table. Gage. Brooke slowed her pace. For a moment, uncertainty crossed her face. Then assumption returned. She looked toward a security officer standing near the entrance. "Excuse me." The officer approached immediately. Brooke pointed towards Gage without lowering her voice. "I think transportation staff came to the wrong floor." Several executives turned. The room grew noticeably quieter. The security officer hesitated. He recognized Gage from previous weeks but knew only that he held unusual access privileges. "I'm sure there's some explanation." Brooke folded her arms. "This meeting is restricted." She looked directly at Gage. "The service elevators are downstairs." A few awkward laughs escaped around the room. One director looked away. Another checked his phone. Nobody intervened. Gage remained seated. His hands rested calmly on the polished table. His expression never changed. The narrator could feel disappointment, but not humiliation. Some lessons revealed themselves only when people believed no consequences existed. The security officer stepped closer. "Sir." Before another word could be spoken, the conference room doors opened once more. Harold Bennett entered. Every conversation stopped instantly. The 70-year-old chairman walked slowly toward the head of the table carrying a single blue leather folder. He looked first at Brooke, then Daniel, then finally at Gage. The room waited. Harold cleared his throat. "Before today's agenda begins, we have one matter of corporate governance." Several board members straightened in their chairs. Brooke smiled politely. Daniel adjusted his tie. Harold continued. "Effective this morning, the Kelly Family Trust has completed executive succession." He opened the folder. "The board unanimously confirms Mr. Gage Kelly as Chief Executive Officer and majority controlling shareholder of Kelly Horizon Logistics." Silence. Absolute silence. No one moved. No chair scraped the floor. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop. Brooke's smile disappeared first. Her eyes shifted slowly toward Gage. The same man she had called the new driver. The same man she had ordered to carry handbags. The same man she had ignored for weeks inside his own company. Her fingers loosened around the presentation portfolio. It slipped from her hand. Documents scattered across the polished floor. No one bent to help. Daniel Whitmore looked toward Harold, then toward Gage, then back again. His face lost all color. Several directors exchanged confused glances. One whispered quietly, "Kelly." Another answered, "Patrick Kelly's son." Recognition spread through the room, one expression at a time. Gage finally stood. He buttoned his jacket calmly before speaking. His voice remained low, measured, clear. Good morning. Nothing more, no speech, no anger, no attempt to embarrass anyone, only two simple words. Somehow, they carried more weight than shouting ever could. Harold gestured toward the empty chair at the head of the table. It belongs to you. Gage walked forward. Every step echoed softly across hardwood floors. He passed Brooke without looking directly at her. She remained frozen beside her chair. The narrator could not enter her thoughts, only observed the shock visible across her face. She seemed unable to understand what reality had become. Gage reached the head of the table and placed a slim black binder before him. Its cover contained only one word: compliance. He remained standing. No one spoke. Outside the windows, helicopters crossed the skyline while morning traffic crawled through downtown streets. Inside, time itself seemed suspended. Harold resumed the meeting. Agenda Item 1. He looked toward Gage. The floor is yours. Gage opened the binder slowly. Inside rested photographs from the charity gala. Vendor contracts, audit reports, server restoration logs, bank transfers, security footage, still images, hundreds of pages, months of preparation. Every document carefully organized, every signature verified, every timestamp authenticated. He looked once around the room, not searching for fear, searching for honesty. Then his eyes settled briefly on Daniel Whitmore. The CFO lowered his gaze. Gage spoke quietly. I spent the last several weeks walking through our warehouses. No one interrupted. I met drivers. He turned another page. I met janitors. Another page. I met mechanics. Another. They all believed someone upstairs cared about this company. The room remained silent. Gage placed one photograph in the center of the table. The image showed deteriorating trailers that accounting records claimed had already been repaired. Then another photograph. Empty consulting offices receiving millions of dollars. Then another. Private meetings, wire transfers, forged approvals. Every page deepened the silence. Brooke stared at the documents without speaking. Daniel's breathing became visibly faster. Outside, clouds drifted across the skyline. Inside, decades of reputation began quietly collapsing. Finally, Gage closed the binder. He looked toward Harold. I believe independent counsel should continue. Harold nodded. The chairman reached beneath the table and pressed a small button. Seconds later, the conference room doors opened. 3 attorneys entered. Behind them came 2 federal financial investigators carrying identification credentials. The room changed instantly. This was no longer a promotion meeting. It had become an investigation. One investigator placed sealed evidence bags onto the table. Another requested that all phones remain where they were. Nobody objected. Nobody dared. Brooke slowly turned toward Gage. For the first time since their divorce, their eyes met without illusion standing between them. He showed neither satisfaction nor revenge, only calm certainty, because evidence had finally arrived where words never could. And before the morning ended, every lie built over the past 3 years would begin unraveling in front of everyone who had once mistaken the owner of the company for its newest driver. No one asked permission to leave. The conference room doors remained closed. Outside, executive assistants waited in silence, confused by the unexpected delay. Phones vibrated inside purses and briefcases, but no one inside the boardroom reached for them. The atmosphere had changed completely. Only 20 minutes earlier, the room had expected applause. Now, every heartbeat seemed louder than conversation. The 2 federal investigators quietly positioned themselves near opposite walls, while 3 attorneys arranged sealed evidence folders across the center of the conference table. No accusations had been spoken. Not yet. Facts would speak first. Gage Kelly remained standing at the head of the table. Morning sunlight poured through the glass behind him, outlining his silhouette against the Chicago skyline. He looked less like a triumphant executive and more like a man finishing a responsibility he had never wanted. The narrator stayed close to his thoughts. Victory brought him no pleasure. His father had spent 40 years building Kelly Horizon. Today, Gage was simply trying to save what remained. One investigator activated a projector. The first image appeared. An invoice, $6.3 million, emergency fleet modernization. Approved 18 months earlier. The next slide displayed aerial photographs of the listed repair facility. The property was empty. Overgrown weeds covered cracked pavement. The building had been abandoned for almost 5 years. No one spoke. Another slide appeared. Consulting fees, $4.8 million. Recipient Northridge Infrastructure. Corporate registration records appeared beside the payment. The company existed only as a rented mailbox, then another and another. The pattern repeated itself dozens of times. Millions disappeared through companies that existed only on paper. The investigator turned toward the board. All documents had been verified by federal forensic accountants. Silence answered him. Harold Bennett slowly removed his glasses. Several directors stared downward at the table. One elderly woman quietly whispered, "My God." Across the room, Daniel Whitmore finally shifted in his chair. "This proves nothing." His voice sounded calm. Too calm. Consulting companies subcontract work all the time. One attorney nodded politely. "Correct." He clicked another remote. The screen changed. Server metadata appeared. Electronic signatures. Timestamps, IP addresses. Administrator access logs. Every executive approval had been digitally inserted within seconds of one another using a single administrator account. Impossible under normal corporate procedures. Someone had manufactured approval chains. Daniel's expression tightened. Still, he spoke confidently. Someone hacked the system. The investigator opened another folder. We considered that possibility. He produced security logs, building access records, server room cameras, employee keycard history. The administrator account had been accessed physically. Only 3 executives possessed authorization: Daniel Whitmore, Richard Lawson, Brooke Morgan. The room became perfectly still. Brooke slowly lifted her eyes from the table. For the first time, uncertainty appeared openly across her face. She looked towards Daniel. He avoided eye contact. Gage noticed. He said nothing. He simply watched. The narrator remained inside his quiet observations. Years of marriage had taught him to recognize hesitation. Daniel had looked toward Brooke many times before during presentations, seeking approval, seeking confidence. Now he refused even to glance at her. Something inside their alliance had already broken. The lead investigator continued. We also recovered deleted audit requests. A new image appeared. Compliance reports. 37 separate investigations. Each automatically erased before reaching board review. Emma Dawson's name appeared repeatedly as preparer. The young analyst sat quietly against the back wall after being called as a witness earlier that morning. She looked nervous, but determined. The investigator addressed her. Miss Dawson, did you prepare these reports? Yes. Were they submitted? Every one. What happened afterward? They disappeared. Did anyone explain why? No. The room listened carefully. Emma took a slow breath. I kept copies. Another folder reached the table. The evidence continued growing. Every deleted report matched suspicious vendor payments. Every payment traced back toward the same executive offices. Daniel leaned forward suddenly. This is ridiculous. His composure finally cracked. We're talking about accounting irregularities. Not fraud, Gage finally spoke. His voice remained almost conversational. Then explain the charter flights. Daniel froze. No one else understood the question. Gage opened another binder. Photographs from the private airport terminal appeared on screen. Victor Sloan, Richard Lawson, Daniel Whitmore, Brooke Morgan. Luxury charter aircraft, date stamps, passenger records. Consulting companies paid every expense. Daniel looked genuinely surprised. Apparently, he had forgotten those photographs existed. The investigator displayed flight manifests. Destination Cayman Islands. Purpose Corporate Consulting Retreat. No such retreat appeared anywhere inside company calendars. Another slide appeared. International wire transfers. Shell corporations. Foreign accounts. The money trail stretched beyond Illinois, beyond the United States. One director quietly pushed his chair backward. "This is criminal." No one disagreed. Brooke remained motionless. She stared at the photographs for several seconds before speaking for the first time. "I attended that meeting." Every eye turned toward her. It was presented as a vendor strategy conference. Her voice sounded weaker now. "I signed reimbursement forms afterward." She looked towards Daniel. "You told me legal approved everything." Daniel answered immediately. "You signed them." "I trusted finance." "You approved them." "I read summaries." "You signed." The exchange ended there. Neither raised their voice. Neither needed to. Truth often destroyed people more quietly than anger. Gage remained silent. He offered no defense, no accusation, only observation. The investigators continued. Bank records appeared. Corporate reimbursements flowed into consulting firms. Consulting firms transferred funds into investment partnerships. Investment partnerships distributed profits into private accounts. Daniel Whitmore's family trust appeared at the end of one chain. Richard Lawson's appeared on another. The room seemed smaller now. Even the skyline outside looked distant. One attorney slid sealed evidence envelopes toward investigators. "We are requesting immediate preservation orders." Harold Bennett nodded slowly. "Granted." Phones were collected. Company laptops confiscated. Executive building access suspended. Human resources directors entered quietly to witness administrative actions. No one resisted. Brooke remained seated while an investigator approached. He placed a printed document before her. "We need clarification regarding these signatures." She studied the pages. Several belonged to her, several did not. Tiny inconsistencies appeared. Digital compression artifacts. Authentication mismatches. Signature overlays. Someone had copied her executive approval dozens of times. She looked toward Gage. He met her eyes briefly. No anger, only disappointment. The narrator understood his silence. He still did not know how much Brooke truly understood. Carelessness and corruption often looked identical from a distance. The investigation would separate them. Outside the boardroom, rumors spread through headquarters with astonishing speed. Employees whispered in hallways. Elevators stopped on executive floors only to find security personnel waiting. Compliance officers entered accounting. Information technology teams locked financial servers. Someone inside marketing accidentally posted congratulations for Brooke's expected promotion before hurriedly deleting the message minutes later. Too late. Screenshots already circulated through employee chats. Reality moved faster. Late morning sunlight climbed higher over Chicago. Inside the boardroom, the final presentation appeared. A still image from hotel security footage. The Peninsula Gala. Brooke handing her handbag to Gage while executives laughed nearby. The timestamp filled the lower corner. Silence returned once more. The investigator looked toward the board. That footage became relevant because it establishes that Mr. Kelly intentionally concealed his executive identity while independently observing internal behavior. Harold Bennett slowly nodded, a decision I personally approved. Several directors finally understood. The weeks of quiet observation, the warehouse visits, the cafeteria lunches, the loading docks, the temporary consultant badge. None of it had been accidental. The owner of Kelly Horizon had walked unnoticed through his own company, watching people reveal themselves without fear, and now there was nowhere left for the truth to hide. As investigators sealed another evidence box, one security officer stepped quietly into the room and handed Harold Bennett a small note. The chairman read it once, then looked toward Gage. "They've detained Richard Lawson downstairs." Another pause followed. Harold folded the paper. "But Daniel Whitmore is gone." The room erupted into startled whispers. Somewhere inside the 40-story headquarters building, the company's chief financial officer had disappeared, and everyone suddenly realized the investigation was far from over. By noon, the news had escaped the 40-story tower, not through a press conference, not through an official statement, but through whispers, elevator conversations, text messages, screenshots, employees standing outside conference rooms pretending to refill coffee while quietly listening through half-closed doors. Kelly Horizon Logistics had never experienced a morning like this. The lobby television still displayed promotional videos celebrating innovation and integrity, yet security officers now stood beside executive elevators while compliance teams carried sealed document boxes through marble corridors. The contrast felt almost surreal. The narrator followed Gage Kelly as he stepped out of the boardroom for the first time in nearly 4 hours. He looked exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. The skyline beyond the windows remained unchanged. The city continued moving. Buses crossed Michigan Avenue. Tour boats drifted along the river. Construction cranes turned slowly above downtown rooftops. Only inside Kelly Horizon had time stopped. Emma Dawson waited quietly near the hallway. She carried 2 paper coffee cups. Without speaking, she handed one to Gage. He accepted it. Neither drank immediately. They simply stood beside the window watching clouds drift over Chicago. After several moments, Emma finally spoke. "I never imagined this. Neither did I. You could have exposed everything weeks ago." Gage looked toward the street below where employees hurried between buildings. "I needed the truth. You already had evidence. I needed certainty." Emma understood. Evidence explained numbers. Certainty explained people. The silence returned. Neither found it uncomfortable. Behind them, attorneys continued reviewing procurement records while investigators interviewed department heads one by one. The process looked almost ordinary. No shouting, no handcuffs, only questions, documents, signatures. Justice often arrived wearing business suits instead of uniforms. Across the executive floor, another conversation unfolded. Brooke Morgan sat alone inside Human Resources Conference Room C. Her company laptop had been removed. Her employee access badge rested on the table. A compliance attorney reviewed standard administrative procedures. Temporary suspension, preservation of records, restriction of system access. Everything sounded procedural, clinical. No accusations had yet been directed toward her personally. Still, every sentence carried invisible weight. Brooke signed acknowledgement forms without reading them. The attorney gathered the papers quietly. "We'll contact you regarding future interviews." She nodded, nothing more. The narrator never entered her thoughts, only observed tired eyes fixed on the empty chair across from her. Perhaps for the first time in years, titles offered no protection. Meanwhile, Daniel Whitmore remained missing. Security footage showed him leaving the executive floor minutes before investigators secured the building. His phone had been switched off. company vehicle remained inside the parking garage. No one knew where he had gone. Federal authorities notified local law enforcement. Search requests expanded. Gage received the update while returning to the boardroom. He read the message once before locking his phone. Harold Bennett noticed. No luck. Gage shook his head. He planned for this. Harold sighed quietly. Your father used to say guilty men always pack before innocent ones know they're traveling. Gage almost smiled. Almost. Patrick Kelly had possessed hundreds of sayings collected from decades in trucking yards and freight terminals. Simple words. Hard lessons. Most proved true. The afternoon meeting resumed. Additional forensic accountants joined through video conference from Washington. Large screens displayed transaction maps connecting dozens of shell corporations across multiple states. Money flowed through consulting firms, holding companies, real estate partnerships, private investment groups. Each transfer appeared legal when viewed individually. Together, they formed a carefully engineered pipeline. The final destinations remained hidden, for now. One accountant enlarged another chart. Unexpectedly, a familiar name appeared. Brooke Morgan, salary reimbursement account, expense approvals, travel allowances, nothing unusual. Then another line appeared beneath it. Duplicate executive authorization credentials, the forensic specialist explained calmly. Her digital signature appears authentic. He paused. But cryptographic verification indicates multiple versions were copied and reused without original authorization. The room grew silent again. Harold leaned forward. So, someone duplicated executive credentials? Yes. Can we identify who? The specialist enlarged another technical report. Administrative access logs, single workstation, executive finance office, primary user Daniel Whitmore. No one spoke. The implication settled across the room naturally. Brooke's approvals may have been manipulated for years. Not every signature belonged to her. Some did. Many apparently did not. The investigation had become more complicated than anyone expected. Gage listened carefully. Relief did not arrive. Only sadness. He remembered evenings when Brooke worked late preparing presentations believing she was helping build the company. Had Daniel quietly hidden fraud behind routine paperwork, or had ambition blinded her to obvious warning signs? The answer remained unclear. Late afternoon sunlight stretched across conference tables. Investigators finally concluded the first phase of document preservation. Computers sealed, servers copied, financial databases locked. One attorney addressed the board. Operations may continue under temporary supervision. Harold looked toward Gage. The company needs leadership immediately. Every director turned. For the first time since morning, there was no uncertainty. The vote took less than 2 minutes. Unanimous. Gage Kelly officially assumed executive authority effective immediately. No applause followed, only signatures. Responsibility never needed celebration. An assistant entered carrying a stack of executive documents requiring immediate approval. Payroll authorization, vendor payments, fuel contracts, insurance renewals. The company still employed nearly 14,000 people. Freight still moved. Drivers still crossed state lines. Warehouses still loaded trailers. Business could not stop simply because executives failed. Gage reviewed each document personally. Several suspicious payments disappeared immediately. Emergency spending froze. Independent audits expanded. Vendor relationships suspended pending investigation. Simple decisions. Quiet decisions. Yet millions of dollars stopped moving within minutes. Elsewhere in the building, ordinary employees sensed change. Maintenance budgets suddenly reopened. Repair requests approved. delayed equipment purchases authorized. Warehouse managers received unexpected emails confirming replacement trailers. Drivers noticed fuel reimbursements processed faster than usual. Nobody understood why. They simply noticed that someone upstairs finally seemed to be paying attention. Near 5 o'clock, Gage left the executive floor and rode the elevator alone. He pressed the button for the loading dock. Not the lobby, not executive parking. The loading dock. Warehouse workers looked surprised when he appeared carrying his jacket over one shoulder. Luis Ramirez stood nearby sweeping concrete. The old janitor smiled. Thought consultants left early. Gage accepted a broom from him. Not today. For several minutes, they worked side by side cleaning packing debris scattered across the dock. No cameras followed. No reporters watched. Forklift operators nodded politely before returning to work. One mechanic approached. "Corporate approved our repair budget." He sounded almost confused. Gage smiled. "Good." The mechanic extended his hand. "Whoever finally signed it, tell them thanks." Gage shook his hand without another word. Sometimes gratitude arrived without recognition. He preferred it that way. As sunset painted western clouds orange above Chicago, Emma found him once more near the employee parking lot. She carried another folder. This came from IT. Gage opened it. Inside rested restored surveillance logs from executive offices. One missing camera angle had finally been recovered. The timestamp matched exactly 22 minutes before Daniel Whitmore vanished. The image showed him entering his office carrying only a leather briefcase. He left carrying two. Gage stared at the photograph. The second briefcase had never been logged. He looked toward Emma. If he took it, she finished the sentence quietly. Then the missing money trail may still be inside. The evening breeze swept across the nearly empty parking lot. Somewhere beyond the skyline, headlights streamed endlessly along Interstate 90. Daniel Whitmore was still somewhere out there. And now, everyone understood he had not fled empty-handed. The rain began just after sunset. Chicago disappeared behind sheets of silver water as headlights reflected across wet pavement and commuter trains rolled slowly through the western suburbs. Inside Kelly Horizon headquarters, only a handful of offices remained illuminated. Most employees had gone home. The investigation had not. The narrator remained with Gage Kelly as he stood alone inside his father's old executive office. The room had remained untouched for nearly 6 years. Patrick Kelly's leather chair still faced the skyline. A faded photograph rested beside the window. One delivery truck. 2 mechanics. 3 smiling employees. The company had once fit inside a single garage. Gage picked up the frame carefully. His father looked younger than he remembered. Grease covered his hands. His smile looked genuine. No designer suits, no private jets, only honest work. Gage placed the photograph back on the shelf. Then he returned to the mountain of evidence covering the conference table. Invoices, emails, server logs, vendor contracts. Every page told part of the story. None told all of it. A quiet knock interrupted the silence. Emma Dawson entered carrying another archive box. "I found something." She placed the carton beside the table. Inside rested old procurement files dating back nearly 4 years. Most appeared ordinary. Routine transportation agreements, fuel contracts, warehouse leases. Then Emma removed one small envelope. No return address. The paper had yellowed with age. Someone had written only 2 words across the front. For Patrick, the envelope had never been opened. Gage carefully unfolded the letter inside. The handwriting belonged to an anonymous employee. The message contained only a few sentences. "If anyone ever audits the consulting division, start with Daniel Whitmore." He hides theft behind complexity because he knows honest people trust paperwork more than instincts. No signature, no explanation, only fear preserved on paper. Gage folded the letter quietly. Someone had tried to warn his father years ago. The warning had arrived too late. Emma looked toward him. What now? He stared through the office window toward the city lights. Now we finish it. Across town, federal investigators worked through the evening inside a temporary operations center. Computers covered folding tables. Maps connected shell corporations with bank transfers. Telephone records. Airport security logs. International transactions. Every hour produced another discovery. At 7:43, one analyst found an unusual purchase. A private storage unit rented 18 months earlier. The customer name Daniel Whitmore. Payment method. Corporate consulting reimbursement. The location sat less than 20 miles from downtown. Within minutes, investigators obtained an emergency warrant. Vehicles departed immediately. Back inside headquarters, Harold Bennett joined Gage and Emma in the old office. The chairman looked older than usual. Fatigue settled heavily across his face. I owe you an apology. Gage looked up. For what? I should have seen this years ago. Harold slowly removed his glasses. I trusted titles. He glanced toward Patrick Kelly's photograph. Your father trusted people. The difference lingered between them. Harold sat quietly. When Patrick hired Daniel, he said intelligence meant nothing without character. What changed? We became bigger. Outside, thunder rolled softly above the skyline. Growth had brought prestige. Prestige had attracted ambition. Ambition had attracted greed. The company survived all three. Barely. An hour later, Olivia Carter arrived carrying fresh court filings. Federal preservation orders had expanded. Personal bank accounts frozen. Corporate reimbursement suspended. Vendor contracts canceled. She looked toward Gage. The board approved every recommendation. He nodded silently. Then Olivia produced another document. Travel records. One entry immediately caught everyone's attention. Daniel Whitmore had booked a one-way charter flight departing Milwaukee before dawn. Destination Grand Cayman. Departure time 5:45 a.m. He was still trying to escape. The room became silent. Emma spoke first. They'll stop him. Olivia hesitated. Only if they reach him first. Gage closed the folder. He won't leave. Harold looked surprised. How can you know? Gage remembered Daniel's office. The missing briefcase, the hidden documents, the unfinished transfers. People who built elaborate schemes rarely abandoned control willingly. Daniel would return for something. He always believed he remained the smartest man in the room. That confidence would become his mistake. Near midnight, headquarters emptied completely. Cleaning crews vacuumed silent hallways while elevator music echoed through deserted executive floors. Security cameras watched every entrance, every parking level, every loading dock. Gage refused to leave. Neither did Emma. They moved through accounting archives one final time, searching for overlooked details. At 12:37 a.m., another discovery appeared. An internal maintenance request, canceled automatically. Location Executive Finance Office. Reason wall safe inspection. Emma frowned. There isn't supposed to be a wall safe. Gage looked toward the office across the hallway. Dark, locked, unused since investigators sealed it. He called federal agents immediately. 20 minutes later, authorization arrived. The seal was removed. Investigators entered carefully. The office looked ordinary. Bookshelves, desk, computer, artwork, nothing unusual. Then one technician noticed faint scratches behind a framed certificate. The painting lifted away. Steel appeared beneath it. Hidden safe. The combination lock remained active. Forensic specialists worked quietly. 5 minutes passed, 10. Finally, the heavy door clicked open. Inside rested stacks of external hard drives. Cash bundles, passport copies, property deeds, and one black leather notebook. Gage recognized it instantly. The missing second briefcase had never mattered. Daniel had hidden everything inside headquarters. The notebook contained handwritten initials beside transfer amounts totaling more than $90 million. Every payment linked executives, contractors, and offshore accounts. Near the final pages, another name appeared repeatedly: Brooke Morgan. Beside each entry, someone had written the same notation: authorization only, no knowledge. Emma stared silently. Olivia read the line twice. Harold lowered himself into a chair. The meaning became painfully clear. Daniel had used Brooke's authority repeatedly while ensuring she remained just informed enough to sign routine paperwork without seeing the larger scheme. Her ambition had made manipulation easy. Her ignorance had made prosecution more complicated. Gage closed the notebook carefully. He showed no satisfaction, only quiet sadness. The marriage had failed for many reasons. Fraud had not started with her. Pride had. Outside rain finally stopped. Clouds drifted eastward, revealing a pale moon above the city. At 2:14 a.m., every recovered document entered federal evidence. Chain of custody forms signed. Digital copies encrypted. Original notebooks sealed. The case had changed completely. The investigation no longer searched for proof. It now searched for one man. As the last evidence box disappeared into an armored vehicle, Gage stood alone beneath the loading dock lights, watching it leave. His phone vibrated. An unknown number. He answered quietly. No greeting came, only Daniel Whitmore's voice. Calm, measured, almost amused. "You finally found the notebook." Gage remained silent. Daniel continued. "If you want the rest of the money, come alone." The line disconnected. No location, no explanation. Only certainty. Somewhere in the darkness beyond Chicago, the architect of the entire scheme was still watching, and he had just invited the new CEO to their final meeting. Dawn arrived quietly over Lake Michigan. The first rays of sunlight painted the eastern skyline in pale gold, while downtown Chicago slowly awakened beneath a cool June breeze. Delivery trucks rolled onto expressways. Commuter trains filled with half-awake passengers crossed the suburbs, and coffee shops unlocked their doors for another ordinary day. For Kelly Horizon Logistics, nothing about this morning was ordinary. The company had survived the night. Its reputation had not. Television crews gathered outside headquarters before sunrise. Satellite trucks occupied both sides of the street. Financial reporters spoke into cameras while scrolling updates appeared across business networks nationwide. Federal investigation expands inside Midwest logistics giant. The headline repeated every 15 minutes. Inside the building, however, the atmosphere felt surprisingly calm. Employees arrived quietly. Warehouse schedules continued. Dispatchers answered phones. Drivers collected routes. Forklifts moved freight exactly as they had yesterday. Business continued because thousands of honest workers still believed in the company. The narrator remained beside Gage Kelly. He stood in the operations control room instead of the executive office. Large digital maps tracked shipments across 12 states, while dispatch coordinators balanced delays caused by overnight storms. No cameras followed him there. No reporters knew where he was. He preferred it that way. Luis Ramirez entered carrying a small paper bag. "I figured CEOs still need breakfast." Gage smiled. Inside rested 2 breakfast burritos from the same neighborhood cafe his father used to visit every Thursday morning. Luis sat beside him. For several minutes they ate without speaking. Finally, the old janitor looked toward the freight maps. Your father would be proud. Gage remained silent. Some compliments felt too heavy to answer. Across the building, Emma Dawson supervised a temporary compliance team reviewing every active vendor agreement. Dozens of employees volunteered to help. Accounting staff worked beside warehouse managers. Human resources specialists sorted contracts. Legal interns scanned invoices. For the first time in years, departments worked together instead of protecting themselves. One by one, suspicious vendors disappeared from company systems. Approved, canceled, frozen, referred. Simple words, extraordinary consequences. By 10 o'clock, federal agents arrived with new warrants. The hidden notebook recovered overnight had transformed the investigation. Shell companies collapsed under scrutiny. Bank accounts froze. Property records surfaced. The financial web Daniel Whitmore had spent years constructing began unraveling faster than anyone expected. Yet Daniel himself remained missing. No confirmed sightings, no financial activity, no phone signals. Only silence. Olivia Carter entered the operations room, carrying another stack of legal documents. They found the storage unit. Gage looked up. And empty. She placed photographs on the table. Metal shelves, dust, broken boxes. Someone had cleared everything only hours earlier. Too late to erase digital evidence, soon enough to remove cash. Olivia exhaled quietly. He planned this for years. Gage nodded. So did we. He no longer sounded uncertain. Preparation had finally overtaken deception. Elsewhere inside headquarters, another meeting quietly unfolded. Harold Bennett gathered regional managers from every distribution center across the Midwest. The old chairman stood before them without prepared notes, without presentation slides, without public relations consultants. He simply told the truth. The company had failed to protect itself. Trust had been abused. Systems had been manipulated. Leadership would change. Integrity would not. Many managers left the room with tears in their eyes. Some had worked beside Patrick Kelly for decades. They finally felt the company returning to the values that built it. Just before noon, an unexpected visitor arrived. Brooke Morgan. She entered through the employee entrance wearing simple jeans, a gray sweater, and no jewelry except her wedding band, which she had never bothered removing after the divorce. Security stopped her immediately. She carried no attorney, no executive assistant, only a single envelope. Word spread quietly through the lobby. Several employees watched from a distance. Nobody approached. The narrator remained with Gage. He received a brief message from security. She wants 5 minutes. He stared at the screen, then replied, "Let her in." They met inside the old conference room overlooking the loading docks. Not the executive suite, not the boardroom, the loading docks, the same place where warehouse workers gathered every morning before sunrise. Rain from the previous evening still glistened across the pavement outside. Brooke entered slowly. She looked older than 48 hours before. Fatigue replaced confidence. Silence replaced certainty. She placed the envelope on the table. My resignation. Gage looked at it but did not touch it. Neither spoke for several moments. Forklifts beeped outside. Workers loaded trailers exactly as they always had. Life continued. Finally, Brooke broke the silence. "I didn't know." The sentence sounded almost too small for everything surrounding it. Gage believed she meant more than fraud, more than Daniel, more than hidden ownership. She meant the entire distance that had grown between who they once were and who they became. He answered quietly, "I know." No anger, no accusation, only truth. Brooke looked through the window toward workers carrying freight into waiting trailers. "You always liked being with them. They built the company. She nodded slowly. I stopped seeing them. Neither mentioned divorce. Neither mentioned money. Some conversations became impossible once enough years passed. She pushed another folder across the table. My personal emails. My notes. Everything Daniel ever asked me to sign. I want investigators to have all of it. Gage accepted the folder. Thank you. She stood to leave. At the door, she paused. I really thought you were just a driver that night. He almost smiled. I was. She looked confused. Gage continued. I was driving the company back where it belonged. For the first time since entering, Brooke lowered her eyes. Then she quietly walked away. No dramatic ending, no tears, no reconciliation. Only consequences. Outside the building, reporters rushed toward her. She ignored every microphone and entered a waiting taxi without speaking. Inside headquarters, Emma received confirmation that over $200 million in future fraudulent contracts had been canceled before payment. Warehouse repair budgets reopened. Driver bonuses restored. Health insurance improvements approved. Small changes. Life-changing outcomes. Late that afternoon, Gage walked alone through Distribution Center 7 on the south side. Employees greeted him by name now. Not because he demanded it, because they finally knew who had been walking beside them all along. One mechanic approached, holding a wrench. You really own this place? Gage nodded. The mechanic laughed. Then next time, coffee's on you. Several workers laughed together. The sound echoed across the warehouse. Simple, honest, real. As sunset approached, federal investigators called with unexpected news. Daniel Whitmore's abandoned SUV had been discovered near a private marina north of Milwaukee. Inside, officers recovered clothing passports and empty cash bags. But no Daniel. He had vanished again. Olivia looked toward Gage. He could be anywhere. Gage stared toward the highway beyond the warehouse loading docks, where hundreds of trucks continued moving across America. No, he answered softly. He'll come back. Olivia frowned. Why would he? Gage watched another Kelly Horizon trailer disappear onto Interstate 90. Because men like Daniel never run toward freedom. They run back toward control. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the architect of the fraud still believed he could rewrite the ending. He was wrong. Because, for the first time since Patrick Kelly founded the company almost half a century earlier, every honest employee inside a Kelly Horizon was pulling in the same direction, and together they had become something far more dangerous than revenge. They had become impossible to fool. Daniel Whitmore came back exactly 3 days later. Not because he had surrendered. Because he believed he could still win. The anonymous tip reached federal investigators shortly after sunrise. A black SUV had entered an abandoned freight terminal on the southern edge of Chicago, a forgotten industrial yard where rusted rail cars sat beside cracked concrete loading docks. The property had once belonged to a bankrupt logistics company before Kelly Horizon acquired the land years earlier. Now it stood empty, or so everyone believed. The narrator remained with Gage Kelly as he stood beside Olivia Carter outside the temporary command center established by investigators. Rain clouds drifted low across the skyline. Police vehicles waited without flashing lights. No dramatic sirens, no television helicopters, only quiet preparation. An FBI supervisor unfolded an aerial map across the hood of a vehicle. Our surveillance confirms movement inside. Gage looked toward the abandoned warehouse. I know why he came. Olivia glanced at him. The money? Gage shook his head. The control? Daniel had spent years convincing himself that intelligence made him untouchable. Men like that rarely abandoned unfinished games. They returned because pride demanded one final move. Federal agents entered first. Their footsteps echoed through the empty terminal. Dust floated through broken windows while pigeons scattered into the morning air. Rows of abandoned trailers lined the warehouse floor. Old forklifts sat motionless beneath torn tarps. The building looked forgotten, yet someone had recently restored electricity. Security monitors glowed faintly in a hidden office overlooking the loading docks. Daniel Whitmore stood there alone. One leather suitcase rested beside him. The second contained stacks of financial records and encrypted drives. The first contained cash, millions in bearer bonds and negotiable certificates, enough to disappear almost anywhere. He watched surveillance cameras quietly. Then he saw Gage walking into the warehouse accompanied only by 2 investigators. A faint smile crossed his face. He had expected that. The meeting lasted less than 5 minutes. No shouting, no threats. Only 2 men standing across from each other inside a building that smelled of steel and rain. Daniel spoke first. "You could have walked away," Gage answered calmly. "So could you," Daniel laughed softly. "You inherited everything." "I built the theft. I worked harder." The words echoed against empty walls. The narrator observed only Gage's thoughts. He remembered warehouse workers, drivers, janitors, mechanics. Thousands of ordinary employees who woke before sunrise every day simply to earn honest paychecks. Daniel had mistaken ownership for entitlement. Patrick Kelly had called ownership responsibility. The difference explained everything. Daniel opened the suitcase. Stacks of documents filled the top layer: transfer accounts, investment structures, hidden partnerships. Enough evidence to expose politicians, contractors, and financiers spread across multiple states. "I'll trade." Gage remained silent. Daniel continued. "Immunity. You don't have that authority." "You do." "No." Another silence settled. Wind rattled broken windows above them. Somewhere outside, a freight train horn echoed across the industrial district. Daniel slowly understood. There would be no negotiation. His shoulders lowered for the first time. The confidence disappeared. Federal agents stepped forward quietly. He offered no resistance. Handcuffs clicked softly around his wrists. The sound lasted less than 1 second. Years of deception ended almost without noise. Outside the warehouse, reporters had already gathered beyond police barricades. Camera lenses pointed toward the loading docks as investigators carried evidence boxes into waiting vehicles. News alerts spread nationwide before noon. Former CFO arrested in multi-state fraud investigation. Kelly Horizon CEO assisted federal investigation. The headlines traveled faster than facts. Gage ignored them. He returned directly to company headquarters. Work remained unfinished. Weeks passed. The investigation expanded across several states. Dozens of fraudulent corporations dissolved. Millions of dollars were recovered. Vendor contracts rewritten. Compliance departments strengthened. Independent oversight permanently established. The company survived. More importantly, its employees did. Warehouse budgets increased. Driver safety programs expanded. Tuition assistance returned. Equipment replacement accelerated. The people who actually moved freight every day finally received investments they had deserved for years. Emma Dawson accepted promotion to Director of Corporate Compliance. She refused a larger office. Instead, she requested additional investigators. Gage approved immediately. Luis Ramirez retired 2 months later. His final afternoon at Kelly Horizon ended with hundreds of employees gathering beside the loading docks. Someone presented him with a framed photograph. It showed Patrick Kelly decades earlier sweeping the warehouse floor beside new hires. Standing next to him in the photograph was a little boy holding an oversized broom. Gage. Luis laughed until tears filled his eyes. Some traditions deserved protecting. Brooke Morgan quietly accepted responsibility for every document she had personally approved while cooperating fully with investigators. Evidence ultimately confirmed what forensic specialists had suspected. Her executive credentials had been repeatedly duplicated without her knowledge. Her negligence carried consequences. Her silence had enabled deception. But deliberate theft belonged elsewhere. She left corporate leadership permanently. Months later, she accepted a position managing community business programs for a nonprofit transportation education foundation. Far from boardrooms, far from cameras. Perhaps closer to the person she once hoped to become. One autumn afternoon nearly a year later, Gage walked alone through Distribution Center 7. The warehouse sounded exactly as it always had. Forklifts beeped, radios crackled, drivers joked while loading trailers. Mechanics argued over engine parts. Ordinary life. The greatest success any company could hope for. A young employee approached nervously. "Mr. Kelly," Gage looked up. The young man extended a coffee cup. "My first day. I heard you started here in the warehouse, too." Gage accepted the cup. "Long time ago." The employee smiled awkwardly. "I hope I move upstairs someday." Gage looked across the endless loading docks, then toward hundreds of workers beginning another shift. He answered quietly, "Never move so far upstairs that you stop seeing who's downstairs." The young man nodded, though he probably would not understand the sentence until many years later. Gage continued walking through the warehouse. No security escort, no photographers, no executives surrounding him. Only another employee greeting drivers by name. Outside, hundreds of Kelly Horizon trucks departed in every direction across America. Each trailer carried freight. Each mile carried responsibility. And somewhere far beyond the highways, people who once judged a quiet man by his worn pickup truck and simple clothes finally learned a lesson that titles could never teach. Real leadership does not announce itself. It reveals itself only after everyone else has underestimated it. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who never feel the need to prove who they are. In a world that judges expensive suits, luxury cars, and impressive titles, true character often walks by unnoticed. Gage Kelly didn't win because he was richer, smarter, or more powerful than everyone else. He won because he stayed patient when others mocked him, stayed calm when others underestimated him, and trusted that truth would outlast pride. In the end, appearances faded, but integrity remained. The quiet man everyone ignored became the one everyone remembered. Maybe that's a lesson all of us need from time to time. We never really know what another person is carrying, what battles they have fought, or what responsibilities rest on their shoulders. A little respect costs nothing, but it can reveal more about our own character than about the person standing in front of us. And sometimes the people we overlook today may become the ones who change our lives tomorrow. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been underestimated because of your appearance, your job, or your quiet personality? Or have you ever misjudged someone and later realized how wrong you were? Share your story in the comments. We read every one of them, and your experience might inspire someone else. And if stories like this remind you that humility, patience, and truth still matter, don't forget to subscribe and join us for tomorrow's story. You never know which lesson might arrive disguised as an ordinary person.